Greetings, everyone. This is Rock and Roll Spot Connection with another installment of Mutant Monday. So, today we'll be talking about the Hellfire Club. Now, the Hellfire Club is a social club for the rich and powerful in Marvel Comics. Its membership is not just X-Men related characters. Both Tony Stark and his father Howard were members. Norman Osborn, also known as the Green Goblin, is a member. Viper, primarily a member of Hydra, but also occasionally, admittedly, also occasionally an ex-villainous. Yeah, hell, Blackheart, the son of Mephisto, he was a member of the Hellfire Club briefly, as was Damon Hellstrom, as we'll see later. But anyways, so the club first appeared in the middle of the Dark Phoenix saga, in Uncanny X-Men number 129, way back in 1980. And I've always felt like they were kind of the first step in the new villains for a new time with for the X-Men, because before in the 70s and 80s, or the 60s and 70s, not the 70s and 80s, in the 60s and 70s, X-Men villains were basically either mutants who were trying to take over the world, human supremacists, or bigots, and their giant robots, or the odd alien race that met the X-Men before meeting the Avengers and the She-Hulk, or the Avengers or the Fantastic Four. You occasionally got others, Juggernaut, but mostly most villains would fall in one of those three categories. And then you had the Hellfire Club, many of whom were mutants, but they were more interested in wealth and power, because they'd already taken over the world. They were already at the top of the food chain. It's kind of those, when you're rich, you kind of already do rule the world. But anyways, we'll get more into that later. So, as I meant, the Hellfire Club itself is a social club. Dates back in the Marvel Universe to 18th century England. Currently, there are branches in Hong Kong, New York City, London, Los Angeles, Paris, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. And there at least once was a branch in Boston. I don't think that branch is still around, however. Currently, the club has been reorganized as the Hellfire Trading Company out of Krakoa. Now each branch has a Council of the Chosen, or Inner Circle, a leadership group, which is actually kept secret for most of the members. The members who are part of it, they know about it. And sure, maybe some of their closer confidants know that, oh hey, Sebastian, he seems to have a lot of pull at the Hellfire Club. But generally speaking, it's kept on the down low. The only reason, largely the main reason, that a non-member of the council or inner circle discovers the council or inner circle is because they're being recruited into it. Now, as I mentioned, each branch has a Council of the Chosen, Inner Circle, whatever. However, there is someone that everyone in those groups answers to. The Lord Imperial of the Hellfire Club, who is over the entirety of the club. All the branches, they're in charge. Lord Imperial is in charge. We'll talk about that a little more later. Well, actually, so there's been in my research I could find 4 listed Lords Imperial. Sir Gordon Phillips, who had been a member for quite some time, and as I recall, was targeted by a coup from within by Shaw and Emma Frost before the club's first actual appearance. Phillips would eventually die of the legacy virus. Then Elias Bogan was Lord Imperial for a while. After Phillips' death, Sebastian Shaw ended up taking over as Lord Imperial, reorganizing the club, but then Shaw was injured, and Roberto da Costa, the new member of the New Mutants, X-Men and X-Force and Avengers, known as Sunspot, became Lord Imperial. And I think technically he still kind of is. Technically. So when it comes to Inner Circles of Note, when Shaw and Frost staged their very successful coup, they rebranded things. Shaw rebranded things. Initially, the New York branch had a Council of the Chosen. Well, after Shaw took over, the Council of the Chosen became the Lords Cardinal. This was what we first met when it came to the Hellfire Club. Sebastian Shaw was the Black King. Emma Frost was the White Queen. Donald Pierce was the White Bishop. And later attempted to become White King, but that's something we'll get into later. Harry Leland was the Black Bishop. Celine Gallo would eventually become Black Queen. Friedrich von Ram was Black Rook. Mayo da Costa, Sunspot's father, would be White Rook. And in fact, that is how membership is hereditary. So, for example, I mentioned that both Howard Stark and Anthony Stark, Iron Man, were members. Well, Tony Stark is a member not because he, bought a membership, but because his father was a member, plain and simple. Angel of the X-Men, Warren Worthington III, he's a member of the Hellfire Club. Why? Because Warren Worthington Jr. was a member of the Hellfire Club. Anyway, so also in those first meetings, there was Mastermind, Jason Wingard, formerly the Brotherhood of Mutants, and then, as I said, attempting to blackmail his way onto the not blackmail, but con his way into the Inner Circle. And he tried to do so by manipulating Jean Grey during the whole Phoenix thing, and bring her to the club as well. Jean was to become the Black Queen. Eventually, the X-Men got through to Jean, and the Hellfire Club was, said, yeah, get out of here, Wingard. And he did. So anyways, Celine Gallo would then become Black Queen. Celine being a multiple millennia old, if I remember correctly, for lack of a better term, vampiric mutant. She is a mutant, Homo superior, but her mutation revolves around basically subsuming life force of others, of living beings. Now, during this time period, the Hellfire Club and the X-Men were very much at odds with one another. The Hellfire Club had largely taken the place of the Brotherhood as the new main villain. Now, don't get me wrong, the Brotherhood still showed up. However, at that point in time, they had been reorganized into the government super team Freedom Force, led by Mystique. But after a while, a truce was worked out between the two groups, and as part of this, Magneto and Storm joined the Inner Circle as the White King together. However, Storm would be seemingly killed, and so Magneto would become the White King by himself. And then later, Magneto would actually depose Shaw and take over as both White and Black King, calling himself the Grey King. He did this by turning Selene and Emma Frost on, by basically getting the two of them to turn on Shaw. The next inner circle was of note was Shinobi Shaw's upstart inner circle. This consisted of Shinobi Shaw as the Black King, Shinobi Shaw being the son of Sebastian Shaw. If you'll recall, he popped up in Marauders #3 this past week. Benedict Kine and Benazir Kaur, White King and presumably White Queen. Not much known about. Also, Reva Page as presumably the Black Queen. Again, there wasn't a lot to really go on with that group. So yeah, the main thing that Shinobi Shaw's inner circle did was try and operate against the London branch, which was at the time run by Black Queen Emma Steed, a nod to an episode of the '60s spy show The Avengers, which the two main characters of it being John Steed and Emma Peel. And in an episode, they ended up visiting the Hellfire Club in London. And in fact, a lot of the aesthetics of that episode were borrowed for the initial appearances of the Hellfire Club in X-Men. So it's kind of a nod back to the source material. Next up was Marguerite Zardos, who was Nightcrawler's adopted mother. And Brian Braddock, Captain Britain, was Black Bishop. Marguerite was the White Queen of the London branch. That's strange. I thought the London branch was black and red, or white and red. Perhaps they are, and I just messed up, which is a distinct possibility. So, this brings us to the aftermath of the Age of Apocalypse, where, shock, amazement, Sebastian Shaw isn't really dead. So, Shaw made a new inner circle. Himself, Selene. Selene had also managed to take Madeline Pryor under her wing, and basically turned her into the Red Queen of this inner circle. Also in the group was Trevor Fitzroy as the White Rook, and kind of working on this off to the side was an exile from the Age of Apocalypse, Holocaust. Next up came Selene's inner circle, where basically Selene took over and said, "Okay, I'm running the show now." And let's just say that the focus became a lot more on the Hellfire portion. In fact, this version consisted of Selene, obviously, Blackheart, son of Mephisto, as Black King. They had Damon Hellstrom prisoner for a while. However, he got out, sent Blackheart back to Hell, took over as and basically claimed the title of White King. The idea being that he would provide a balance. You know, you have Selene, Blackheart for evil and darkness, and Hellstrom and others for light and good. Also of note here was Roberto da Costa's Sunspots joining at this point. Next up, we have Sebastian Shaw's Lord Imperial stint. So, Shaw became Lord Imperial, reorganized the inner circle. He named, at the suggestion of his assistant Tessa, who was and had been a long time intelligence asset of Charles Xavier's. Shaw named Sunspot as Black King. Selene retained her title as Black Queen. However, she was not actively participating as she was imprisoned beneath the club itself. Then Excalibur villainous Saturnine, or masquerading as Courtney Ross, her Earth 616 counterpart Courtney Ross was the White Queen. And White Queen's bodyguard, White Warrior Princess, was in fact Viper. Now what would happen here is that there would end up being a protracted fight between Lord Imperial Shaw and on-off member, or Inner Circle member, Donald Pierce, who was at that point in time not a member. And Shaw would be grievously injured. And so Tessa suggested that he passed the title of Lord Imperial on to the Black King, Roberto da Costa, which was part of the long-term plan. So the next Inner Circle was in Necrotia. This was another one of Selene's. It was partially people that she resurrected early on in Necrotia, and partially just her hangers-on in the build-up to Necrotia. But you had the Earth 616 version of Blink, former acolyte Senyaka, Dazzler's half-sister Mortis, former Xavier student Wither, and her longtime ally Eli Bard. Yeah. They got their asses handed to them in the conclusion of Necrotia. So, yeah. That's really all that can be said there. Next up was the sixth Inner Circle, and honestly the most noteworthy members here are Sebastian Shaw and Miss Sinister. Then came the seventh one. Now, the seventh Inner Circle is actually kind of noteworthy. This was probably one of the few times where it was, this was all human. In fact, in the build-up, it had been revealed that they had managed to get to this point where, with the Inner Circle saying, yeah, we got rid of all the mutants who had entrenched themselves into the Inner Circle itself. So things are going well. And then the son of at that point Black King, Cade Kilgore, the son of the Black King who oversaw this, oversaw the assassination of the Inner Circle and installed himself and 3 friends as a new Inner Circle. Kilgore himself was Black King. Black Bishop was Dr. Maximilian Frankenstein. Yes, a descendant of Dr. Victor Frankenstein. Then you had Manuel Nduke, who was Nduke. I'm actually not sure how it's pronounced. Who was the White King, and the White Queen was Wilhelmina Kensington. This Inner Circle popped up after the events of Schism, which we discussed a few weeks ago. They basically reignited the Xavier School Hellfire Club enmity as Kilgore created a Hellfire Academy, which stood against the X-Men, the Jean Grey School, and eventually would fall to the staff of the Jean Grey School. Various villains got involved in the school, including Sabretooth. But yeah, they were promptly disbanded, and Shaw returned as the Black King. Now, there is a version I should I feel I should at least give some lip service to. It actually is from a while previous to all this. During Joss Whedon's run on Astonishing X-Men, this is generally referred to as being Cassandra Nova's Inner Circle. And it consists of Cassandra Nova, Sebastian Shaw, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and possibly also Emma Frost. But it was all the manifestation of guilt that a psychic manifestation of guilt that felt by Emma Frost or something along those lines. Basically, they weren't real, so I don't really count them as high up as So now this was after the events of Secret Wars and I want to say while the Terra Genesis cloud was going around, we had the 8th Inner Circle, which consisted of Sebastian Shaw, once again as Black King. Briar Rowley was Black Bishop. Monet St. And in fact the only non-mutant in the group. Monet St. Croix, also known as the X-Men member M, was the White Queen. Black Tom Cassidy was the White Bishop, and Magneto was once again recruited to be the White King. It lasted for a little while and promptly fell apart. And then the most recent version of the Circle was shown during Matt Rosenberg's run on Uncanny X-Men, which concluded just before House of X and Powers of 10. This had Emma Frost as the White Queen, Mystique as the White King, Elixir as Black Bishop, Marrow as Black Rook, and Vanisher was also involved, basically as their group teleporter. Now the thing is that before this arc began, the X-Men Black Emma Frost one-shot focused on Emma manipulating the X-Men into helping her basically depose Sebastian Shaw from the Hellfire Club. Anyways, in the with the post-Krakoan world that the X-Men are now inhabiting, we now have the Hellfire Trading Company, which is largely thought to have taken the place of the Hellfire Club as a whole. You have 3 houses within it. Three courts. White Court, headed up by White Queen Emma Frost, and also including White Bishop Christian Frost, Emma's brother. Next is the Black Court with Sebastian Shaw as Black King and Shinobi Shaw as Black Bishop. And finally we have the Red Court, headed up by Kate Pryde. And she's looking to add to it. Though her first initial recruit for the Bishop, well, that's probably fallen through. Though I kind of hope that it doesn't. So, like I mentioned earlier, the Hellfire Club tends to represent the corrupting influence of wealth and power, and really kind of exemplifies a George Carlin quote. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. But it basically kind of exemplifies the idea that, wealth and power does kind of supersede everything else about a person. I mean, you've got Sebastian Shaw, who had no problem using his company to help build Sentinels. A mutant heading a major corporation and knowingly making Sentinels. They're also an excellent source of political intrigue within the X-Men titles, because of the inherent societal politics of groups like the Hellfire Club. You do get intrigue you don't normally get in superhero books. At least unless it's designed that way. The book in general. They're also excellent foils to the X-Men, because the X-Men, for years, their whole thing is trying to integrate into human society, right? The Hellfire Club, not only are they integrated into human society, they're at the top. So yeah, they want something done. They throw money at it till it gets done. But yeah, it does make for. They do make for excellent foils, and as I mentioned, in the '80s, they were kind of the most prominent group of X-Men villains. There've also been offshoot groups from the Hellfire Club, especially the Hellions. Now, the Hellions were basically the Hellfire Club's version of the New Mutants. I mentioned the truce between the X-Men and the Hellfire Club earlier, which led to Storm and Magneto joining the Inner Circle as White Kings. Now, the thing about this is that before this, the Hellfire Club had actually opened their own school, the Massachusetts Academy, and they were training students there and training them to be supervillains. Firestar, who would later go on to join the New Warriors and the Avengers, and then the X-Men, she was a member. There was actually a point where the Hellions and the New Mutants were merged into one. So actually a lot of the New Mutants ended up being Hellions too. Warpath, of X-Force fame, he is in fact a long-standing Hellion, recruited based on the fact that he had a vendetta against Xavier because he blamed Xavier for the death of his brother Thunderbird. Another offshoot group was the Reavers, and the Reavers will actually get their own video in this series, well, sub-series of such or sorts. But the Reavers are a group of cybernetic mercenaries led by former, well, as I said earlier, on-off Inner Circle member Donald Pierce. And in fact, three of the most constantly appearing Reavers, Cole, Macon, and Reese, were in fact Hellfire Club security guards that were all mortally wounded by Wolverine during the X-Men's first fight with the Hellfire Club back during the Dark Phoenix saga. But yeah, we'll touch, maybe not immediately, but we will be touching on the Reavers in a more detailed format at a later date. So anyway, that's it for now. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Links to my Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and PayPal can be found in the description box down below. This is Rock and Roll Spock signing off, saying, live long and rock hard.